Ducks fans, are you ready? You are listening to the Ducks and Pucks podcast with your hosts, Mike Walters and Eddie Jones. This is the #1 home for Anaheim Ducks talk and analysis. Here we go.
Welcome to the show. This is your host, Mike Walters, along with my co-host, Eddie Jones, and we have a great show for you this week. It's the You Can't Win Here show, Eddie, as the Ducks took out Calgary twice this week. So it's an exciting show. We're going to be talking about the Ducks games. They went on that road trip up to Canada. They had some kind of iffy games, and then obviously some good games. The last game at home against Calgary was definitely the best one, as you all saw. There's some videos we posted on Twitter. We'll get into all of that. Tons of injury news that we got to cover, mainly the Ducks defense. We'll go into that. We'll talk about the playoff picture. We'll also talk about the NHL and the Olympics and the whole debacle with that. But let's go back to this road trip, Eddie. The Ducks went to Vancouver first, still battling it out for first place. And they went there and they basically demolished the Canucks. They started off with 3 goals in the first period there, Perry, Eves, and Ritchie. And basically the Ducks rolled from that point on, Eddie. They took out the Canucks, even without Getzlaf, as we found out last minute. He wasn't able to go because of an upper body injury.
Yeah, and they got on them early. I mean, you scored 23 seconds into the first period, and then Eves scores just over a minute later. I mean, well, you can't ask for a better start. It was an easier game. We said before on the last podcast that this is a game they should be winning against a team who's not in the playoffs. And, of course, they came out and they played strong in this one. But the points matter. And you look at the standings right now, there's little separating the Ducks from the Sharks and the Oilers right now. So any game matters, and a big 4-1 win in this one was a strong effort all the way throughout.
Yeah, the Ducks, they had 4 more shots on goal than the Canucks. Faceoffs were kind of even, so, the Ducks didn't really dominate there. The power play was 0 for 4. Again, we talked about that. That's kind of been the weakness of the Ducks heading into the end of the season here. Obviously, there's some other concerns with the defense that we're going to have to talk about. But as far as their play overall, the Ducks have been doing great in all areas of the game. Just mainly the power play. That's only been the thing that's still concerning me a little bit, Eddie. This game they went 0 for 4.
Yeah, and this was the trend leading up to this game as well, as it had been struggling all season. It picked up a little bit later on in the week, especially in the games against Calgary. It picked up a couple crazy games there, and hopefully now, it's starting to trend upwards with it picking up, and hopefully we can see a system that they're starting to work out here, and obviously. You still got the same guys out there, but hopefully they're working out some of the kinks, and come playoff time, it's going to be important to get those key power play goals. You can't have it go completely cold and expect to move on to the next round.
Yeah, exactly, Eddie, and that's what we talked about. Has been, the part of the issue is not that they got to dominate on it, but they got to cash in once in a while. Also, Bernier was in net in that Vancouver game. He did well. He also went again in the Winnipeg game that was next up. This was another game that you and I talked about. We thought the Ducks would win the Vancouver game and this game, and we talked about how both these opponents, anybody can win on any given day. And the way that this game started out, you thought maybe the Ducks had a chance to win this one. Silfverberg and then Perry again. Perry starting to heat up. Perry had actually 2 goals in this game and 1 on the power play. As you talked about, the Ducks did go 1 for 2 on the power play. But we saw the Ducks revert back to some early season play, Eddie. The third period, they basically went to sleep. I mean, for lack of a better term, they got outshot by the Jets in this game, 41-28, and it came back to bite the Ducks. Our favorite, Dustin Byfuglien, who loves to hit players in the back of the head like Corey Perry, scored with 12 seconds left in this game. It went to overtime. Then, of course, everybody moans. Once that overtime comes up, we're all like, great, can we at least get to the shootout? No, the Ducks lose. Scheifele scores. And the Ducks earned a point in this one, but you got to be a little frustrated, Eddie. We've seen this back in October, November. We thought the Ducks cured it, and it kind of reared its ugly head in this game as the Ducks gave away an extra point.
Yeah, I mean, they played a great 40 minutes, and then that was it. Like you said, you go into the third period, and Winnipeg just turned it on. I mean, their speed, especially from guys like Nikolai Ehlers, he had 2 assists on the final 2 goals in the third period. And Dustin Byfuglien, I mean, not his speed, but just his size and his presence took over this game. And it's disappointing at the end for it to end so late like that, and for the Jets to take the goal with 12 seconds to go. You thought the Ducks might be able to hold on despite playing such a poor third period. But I mean, it's good. Obviously, they got the 1 point. Great for Perry to get 2 goals in this game, but this is a game that they should have won. One of the best third period teams in the NHL, and for them to play so poorly for once in the third period, it's a little bit disappointing.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're keeping a record at home in that third period, Winnipeg outshot the Ducks 17-2. So I mean, look at that. I mean, in the beginning, the Ducks had 26 shots to Winnipeg's 22 in the first 40 minutes, and then Winnipeg goes on dominates. Even in the overtime, Winnipeg had 2 shots, the Ducks had none. So from the second period on through the overtime, the Ducks only had 2 shots on goal. That's completely unacceptable. It's the Jets who are not even in the playoffs. They're playing for pride, which I had mentioned in the game preview before, playing for pride, and I think you and I talked about it on the show too. It's a dangerous weapon for a team, especially a team like the Jets. They get up to play against the Ducks, so definitely frustrating because now the Ducks go into the back-to-back scenario. They got Edmonton and Calgary on last Saturday and Sunday. Instead of being 2 points up on Edmonton, they're a point up on Edmonton. They go into that game. And we wondered what would happen in terms of the goalie situation, Eddie. And this is the one where Gibson came in and played, and then Bernier took the second game. And so this was a huge game. You had the teams battling it out at this point. Anybody could really, win the division. And Edmonton, they scored first in this one. McDavid, he's been scored the last 2 games now against the Ducks. We did see the Ducks cash in on the power play, as you talked about. They got better this week. Getzlaf and Eves. Getzlaf's rocket of a shot on that power play was great to see. Eves has been dominating. We'll talk about some of his stats, since he's been a member of the Ducks. But the Ducks couldn't hold on in this one either, Eddie. Just like that game against the Jets, it looked like the Ducks would win. They were up 2-1 late in the third. And then another favorite player of Ducks fans, Milan Lucic, scores with just under 2 minutes to go to force overtime. Mind you, it was on a power play on a very questionable, cheesy call. I'm sorry, it was a weak call. But anyways, they tied up the game and then go to overtime. The same thing happens. The Ducks lose in overtime, and now they end up tied for first with Edmonton because they gained a point, but Edmonton gained 2 in this one, Eddie.
Yeah, and really, I mean, the Ducks were lucky, I think, to get a point out of this game. I think if anybody deserved to win this game, it was John Gibson. He played a great game, despite obviously giving up the 3 goals. But he played a strong game in this one, a good return to action for him. But yeah, I mean, it's disappointing. This, obviously right now it doesn't matter with the Ducks being 4 points up on the Oilers. But when this game was played, it was a big game. It was a 4-point game. The winner would be leading the Pacific Division. And the fact that, the last 2 games against Edmonton, we were talking about how Kessler had shut down Connor McDavid up until that point. He had only 2 points in the 6 games that they played. And in the last 2 games that he's played against us, he has 3 points in both games, and he's been dominant. And the other end of that as well is Leon Draisaitl. I mean, he's been a thorn in the Ducks side every time they play the Oilers. He's one of the guys that always seems to be on the score sheet when the Ducks play the Oilers, and this is a possible matchup somewhere throughout the playoffs for the Ducks. So they're going to have to be able to contain both these guys if they're going to move on and possibly play the Oilers in the second round.
Yeah, and what was frustrating too in this game, just like the last one, we had talked about Getzlaf was out in the Vancouver game, then he came back, he played, in the Winnipeg, Edmonton game, he's played all the rest of these games. So the Ducks had all their forwards in these last 2 games, but in this one, they only managed 18 shots on goal. I mean, it's very just disappointing because the Oilers had 37. So the last 2 games, the shot disparity has been, not good for the Ducks. And like you said, the Jets game, it was a little bit different. The Ducks came out, played very well the first, 40 minutes. And like you said, in this one, Gibson really kept the team together, especially early on. He had to make some big saves, or else, Edmonton could have had a couple extra goals in this game. But a little concerning, Eddie, that the Ducks, you want to get 20-plus shots on goal. In this game, they only managed 18.
Yeah, and I think the main issue this game against the Oilers was they weren't getting a lot of shots on the blue line. And when the Ducks do that, you see them reach 30, 40 shots on the season. And in this game, I mean, they only had 3 shots from the blue line. They had 1 shot from Vatanen and 2 shots from Lindholm. And you even look towards the next game where they had 34 shots against the Flames. I mean, BX had 2 shots, Fowler had 5, Holzer had 2, Manson had 3, Theodore had 2. I mean, that's when the Ducks are playing their game, when they're getting a lot of shots from the blue line, they're getting bodies to the net, and they're going for the rebounds, and they just couldn't get their game established against the Oilers. And I mean, credit to them. The Oilers aren't a team that you would credit to be a great defensive team, but they played a solid game in this one. They limited the Ducks' chance to the blue line. They played aggressive, and when you're playing a guy like Connor McDavid and how fast he is, it makes the blue line really think. And they've got to make quick passes on the blue line, and they're not able to get shots through. So I think that's something obviously we see improve against the games in Calgary. But again, if they're going to play the Oilers in the playoffs, they're going to have to look to get more shots from the blue line.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about it before, and we'll talk about it a little bit later in the show. But if it came down to the Ducks playing the Oilers or the Flames, I'd rather have the Ducks play the Flames, and we'll talk about those two games in a minute here. But part of the problem going on with the Ducks right now is the injury news. And in this game, 2 different Ducks players were injured, Eddie, and of course, both from the blue line. Lindholm had some kind of upper body injury. We don't know exactly what it is. It sounded like it was maybe some kind of nagging injury he had before, and it got a little bit worse. And so we didn't get to see him play in the last couple of games. His status is still up in the air. The Ducks are going to be taking on, obviously, Chicago and the Kings in the last couple games here. So we don't know what's going on with him. Vatanen took a puck up high, kind of around the shoulder area, it looked like, maybe close to the head, and he was out too. So unfortunately, not only did the Ducks, lose this game. I mean, at this time, like you had said, it was a bigger game. Obviously, the Ducks are back in control of their own destiny. Thank you, Flames. But they had lost 2 players in this one and had to go forward. So it's kind of a little bit of a concern, and we'll get to some more updates. But the Ducks are really thin at the blue line, Eddie, as they go down these final games.
Yeah, I mean, losing Lindholm and Vatanen, hopefully it doesn't seem that it's long term, but even in the last 2 games, the Ducks have been lucky that they've had this depth on defense that we've talked about. It's for so much around the trade deadline and before that and before the season. The Ducks are one of the deepest teams on the blue line, and being able to call up guys like Theodore and Montour to fill those 2 spots, it's almost like having a Lindholm and Vatanen light, and having 2 guys who are very similar, just a bit younger, to fill in, and obviously it worked out, and it was sufficient enough for these 2 games in Calgary, as they got wins in both of them where Theodore and Montour both played. So it's great to be able to have those guys to fill temporarily. But come playoffs, I mean, for sure, you're going to want to have Hampus, Lindholm in the lineup every game that you play in the playoffs. And obviously, Sami Vatanen's an important part to that as well. And now, obviously, with Cam Fowler going down, I mean, the Ducks are lucky to have this much depth on defense. If it was any other team and you had your 3 top defensemen go down, it wouldn't be looking good going into the playoffs.
Yeah, and that's the concern. We'll get a little bit more of that. We've got a lot of fan questions, and like 90% are about the defense and injuries. So we'll cover all of that. But like you said, it is a big deal. So the Ducks, without Lindholm, without Vatanen, they then go play Calgary in the back-to-back scenario. Bernier comes in net. Obviously with Gibson playing against Edmonton, and the Ducks go with Bieksa, Fowler, Holzer, Manson, Theodore, and Montour in this game. The game starts out good for the Ducks again. Eves scores again on the power play. Silverberg chips in. It looks good. The Ducks are up 2-0 in the first period. Then Versteeg decides that he wants to come back for the Flames in this game. He gets 2 goals, both on the power play. They make it 2-2. And then the high-powered offensive German tank Holzer scores and gets the Ducks back to 3-2. His second goal of the year. Haha. But anyways, he chips in there. Big goal for the Ducks. Frolik comes back, ties up the game. And this game was just back and forth, back and forth. 3-3 late in the third period, Eddie. It looks like the Ducks are going to go to another overtime game. We're sitting here going, please, God, no. Obviously, we all hate the overtime, and we know the Ducks do too. And Logan Shaw comes in. Gets a nice goal with Kessler and Cogliano helping out on that play. A huge goal. The Ducks end up edging the Flames in this one, 4-3, Eddie, and just a big win after those 2 disappointing losses. Ducks played a lot better in the face-off. They got a power play goal, more shots, everything. This was a much better game by the Ducks.
Yeah, and like you said, it is a big win. It prevented them from falling into the wild card and give them enough points that they would only finish in the top 3 in the Pacific Division. Obviously, the same night, the the Kings, I believe, beat the Oilers, so it gave the Ducks a 2-point advantage on the Oilers as well. So, a big game all around there. And I think it was key that they were able to grind out this win. I think they definitely deserved it. Brian Elliott gave the Flames a more of a chance than anybody in this game. He made some key saves on Raquel and Eves right in front of the net. Couple good glove saves, and I mean, he kept them in it. And for Logan Shaw and Korbinian Holzer to get on the board and get the game, the third and fourth goal of the game, like Logan Shaw getting the game winner. I mean, that's great for the Ducks, and you're going to need those guys to chip in at key times like that, especially going into the playoffs. So a big win against a tough team, a team that we might see in the first round in the playoffs, which would be a crazy first round. I remember the last time we played them in the second round a couple seasons ago, and how crazy of a second round that was. So after the shenanigans of these last two games, to see them play each other in the first round would be intense.
Yeah, and you talk about the shenanigans. This game was pretty mild. Obviously back and forth, and the Ducks were able to pull it out. And then with the weird scheduling, the Ducks then came home and played Calgary again in this back-to-back scenario. And the beginning of this game, the Ducks didn't play as well. I mean, they weren't getting shots on goal in the first period. Backlund scored. They were, the Flames were up 1-0. After that first 20 minutes, you were kind of like, well, hey, what are the guys doing? Because they had played a decent game against them on the road. The Ducks got outshot 11-3 in the first period. Kind of trying to figure out what was going to happen. The second period, Eve strikes again, as we'll talk about how he's been doing with the Ducks, but he struck early. This play was an awesome play, Eddie. If you didn't catch this goal, Getzlaf off the face-off, shovels the puck right at Elliott, gets him caught off guard. He leaves a fat rebound, and Eves puts it in. It was just a great play. We've seen Getzlaf do that a couple times off the faceoff. It's just a super dangerous tactic, and I love it, and it worked. So the Ducks were able to tie it up early. Bieksa, again, another high-powered score for the Ducks, comes through on a little bit of an iffy play. We know that there was a review. It took a long time. I personally, when I saw it, Eddie, I didn't think it was going to count. But when you go by the rules, you and I talked about, if it's inconclusive, which, I mean, it was close, but you couldn't quite tell. It upheld, and the Ducks had the 2-1 lead, which was huge. You talked about secondary scoring. Chris Wagner, one of my favorites, scores. And, the Ducks are up 3-1, and they go on to win this game. But that's not the story in this game, Eddie. The Ducks won, and it was huge. They're in control of their own destiny. But the big play in here is Giordano. He hits Fowler, goes down a heap. His knee's hurt. He does not come back in this game. And then, Eddie, after that, all hell breaks loose the rest of this game.
Yeah, I mean, there was 76 penalty minutes for the Flames, 36 for the Ducks. A majority of them coming after that hit on Cam Fowler. And, it just got insane after that. Immediately, Josh Manson goes after Giordano, roughs him up a bit. You get Backlund getting in a fight after that as well. Kessler roughing up. You had penalties left, right, and center. Flames had a 5-on-3 at one point. Ducks killed that off. The Ducks had a couple power plays to finish the game too, and it was just insane. It was just chippy from that moment on. You had Matthew Tkachuk and Corey Perry getting into it. I mean, this is a team where you've got a lot of guys who can get under your skin, and for both these teams to meet and for something like that to happen, you've got a lot of blood boiling, and there was a lot of guys in the penalty box at one point. I mean, the Ducks had two usable defensemen at one point in this game in the third period. They had, I believe, Kevin Bieksa, and I think it was Theodore Manson that were out there. And you only had two out there. You had Getzlaf playing defense at one point, and he got a penalty, and you had to put somebody else on defense. So, yeah, it was a crazy game. I mean, obviously the big story is Fowler and if he's going to be okay. And, obviously the way we all saw the hit and the way he went down and the way his knee bent, it doesn't look good. Obviously no news on that other than the fact that he went for an MRI the other day. He's listed as day-to-day right now, but, we both kind of agree that's most likely just a precautionary, just to put something out there and let everybody know where they're at right now. But the MRI will tell them everything. And, I mean, that's kind of what we're waiting on right now. Fowler's the guy who eats the most minutes for this team. He's been the most valuable defenseman, arguably, for them all season. And to have him possibly hurt long-term and not be available for if not maybe the first round, second round, or even the whole playoffs, depending on how far the Ducks go. That's a big loss at this point in the season.
Yeah, I agree, Hetty. It's freaking huge. I mean, the way the Ducks have been playing lately, you and I talked about it. They look, primed to make a good run now. Probably 3-4 weeks ago, it wasn't the case, but they've really turned it on. And then to have this happen, and then, mind you, Giordano doesn't even get reviewed, nothing. His comment was there was no intent or whatever, but I call that as BS. If you look at the play, he's sitting, in a position where he's got his knee extended, and he takes a long stride at Fowler. Maybe he didn't intend to hit him on the knee, but he has his knee bent, extended, going towards his legs for a good 2-3 seconds. I'm sorry. That's BS. And the fact nothing was called, nothing was reviewed, that I think infuriated me, and I'm sure it infuriated all of you listening out there. So who comes to the rescue? Another one of my favorites, Josh Manson. He comes out there, lays the uppercut on Giordano, knocks him out. You can see that video on our Twitter. I know you guys love that one. That one's been going pretty viral with the hashtag #WeAreAllJosh Manson, which I'm glad he did that. And I don't care what Giordano says. That was a dirty play. I'm sorry. It wasn't that he just hit him right when he went by him. He was extended for a good couple, 2-3 seconds, Eddie. That's what makes me upset about it. It wasn't just a bang-bang play. And for him to act like there was no intent. Maybe there wasn't intent, but the positioning that he did, it's a bad play. And the fact that nothing happened, it's just unfortunate because you see the Ducks now, Lindholm, Vatanen, Fowler, arguably your top half defensive core is hurt. It's just very frustrating, and we're still waiting to see who can all come back. We know Vatanen, according to Eric Stevens, said he could be back for this game against Chicago and the Kings, but the Ducks are thin at the blue line, and for this to happen and then for him not to get any repercussion, it's just baffling to me.
Yeah, and it's when the hit comes to. I mean, Fowler breaks into the zone, fires a shot off, a couple seconds go by, and then Giordano hits him. I mean, that's
exactly
one of the most disappointing things to me is the fact also that there was no penalty on the play. Obviously, Josh Manson took that into his own hands and got some redemption for that. But yeah, it doesn't really matter. It all comes down to us. Yeah, we're all happy Josh Manson beat the crap out of Giordano, and there's a lot of fights, exciting game. Ducks won, but like we said before, Fowler's been their best defenseman. He plays 25 most of the time plays 25 minutes, 27 minutes a night, and to have that not in the lineup for the foreseeable future is going to be huge. Guys are going to have to fill spots. Theodore is probably going to have to come up and play 20 minutes. Montour is going to have to play close to 20 minutes. Manson's going to have to play more. Lindholm is going to probably have to play 25 minutes a night, which is fine, and we know he can do that. But Vatanen is going to have to come in and play close to that, and the minutes are going to have to be spread out. And hopefully, we hear back today, and it's not as bad as it looked. But I mean, the way we all saw that hit and the way his knee bent, it doesn't look good.
Yeah, and I mean, as we're doing the podcast now, obviously I'm monitoring all the news feeds and whatnot, and trying to see any other kind of news or anything from some of the people I know. And obviously the Ducks are keeping a super tight lip on this because, as we've talked about before, when it becomes close to playoff time and teams in the playoffs, they're not going to want to release information. They keep it, pretty much under wraps. But we're just hoping that it's not long term. So we're going to have to see. The other part of this game that was the funny part is obviously if you were either there at the game or you heard on TV was the "You Can't Win Here" chant, which was pretty hilarious. If you weren't keeping track, but the Ducks have the longest winning streak at home against an opponent in the NHL, obviously the Flames. They've beaten them 25 times now in the regular season, Eddie, going back to 2004.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a crazy streak. Like the fact, you just think of how many different teams that they've had, how many different players have played for this team. I mean, in over those 25 years, and the fact that they can just keep winning, and the Honda Center is such a bad place for the Flames to play, it's insane. I mean, we joke about it every time that we see a game on the schedule where the Ducks are playing the Flames at home, that it's a guaranteed win, and it almost seems like that now. I mean,
It has been
so long. It's been over 13 years, 25 different games, multitude of different players, different goalies, different rosters, different superstars on teams. I mean, Getzlaf and Perry were rookies as far back as you can go when this streak started. I mean, it's just insane. I mean, the streak started before the first lockout. I mean, that's how far back
Yep.
this goes. It's just insane. And it makes it even crazier that these teams play in the same division too. I mean, they play each other more often than if it was, say, the Ducks and the Leafs, and it was a streak that the Leafs can't beat the Ducks at Honda Center over 25 games. I mean, these guys play each other 2 or 3 times a year at home, at Honda Center, and the fact that the Ducks could just keep winning, and I don't know what it is. I mean, maybe the players, it just gets in their head, or it's just one of those things. It's just one of those streaks that you can't explain. It just keeps happening.
Yeah, and if you look at this streak too, you go back to 2004. It was the mighty Ducks at Anaheim playing at Arrowhead Pond. So, I mean, that's how far back we're going here. Is after the Ducks, made their run back, in 2002, 2003 season. Shortly after that. But I mean, you're going back before the team changed colors and the building changed name and all that. So very crazy streak. And like you and I had talked about in previous shows, I mean, if the Ducks are going to play a team in the first round, that's who we kind of, not saying that they would beat them outright. I mean, we saw what happened the last time they met too, but they think they'd have a good chance. And the way that it looks now that might be the case, we're going to talk about all the playoff scenarios across the league in a little bit, but that's how it looks. Now, as far as the team goes on the defensive issue, this is like all your fan questions. Everybody wants to know about Fowler, Lindholm, Vatanen, Stoner, all these questions. So a bunch of people were asking about Fowler and Lindholm. Daniel asked about some of the questions, the D pairings. Daniel was pissed about the Giordano hit, like I'm sure all of you are. And obviously Eddie and I have talked about too. But if we're looking at it now, it gets even more complicated, Eddie. Holzer went back to his hometown in Germany. We don't know exactly why, some kind of personal issues. So now you look at the Ducks defensive core, you're down Lindholm, Fowler, Holzer. Vatanen's supposed to be back. It's kind of a tenuous situation. I mean, you've got Vatanen and Montour, Theodore and Manson. And then Stoner, they said, wasn't cleared on yesterday, but if he's cleared, then you'd have Stoner and BX. So that's all you have, Eddie. You only have 6 defensemen right now. If even Stoner can go.
Yeah, and I mean, if he can't, you're looking at the Gulls and calling up another player from them. I mean, we already got Theodore up. We've already got Montour, I mean, who I guess has actually solidified his spot on the Ducks so far this season. But yeah, you're looking at maybe calling up Schultz, calling up Walensky, maybe calling up Nate Ginnon. I mean, that might be an option for the Ducks if Stoner isn't ready to go. It has to be. I mean, you can't play with 5 defensemen. I doubt they would do that, especially against a team like the Blackhawks. And this game's still meaning something if the Ducks want to solidify winning the Pacific Division. So, it's a tough situation to be in. Obviously, it's nice to have Theodore and Montour play more games. It's great to you got BX there. You've got Manson who's still playing. But yeah, I mean, Vatanen coming back will be great for the Ducks if he's for sure ready to go. He said he's ready to go, so hopefully he's playing tonight as well. And honestly, I do hope Stoner's ready. It'd be nice to see him to get some time before the playoffs, especially if Fowler is going to be out long term. He's a guy that we're going to see most likely play in the top 6 come playoff time, so it's important to see him get back in the lineup. But if not, I mean, the Gulls are going to lose more players to us, and they're battling for playoff position too. So I'm hoping that it doesn't affect their season as well.
Yeah, exactly. We put out the last bi-weekly report on the Gulls, and the Gulls are in the playoffs, obviously, if you haven't been following that. So they've been doing very well. And Enroth went back down there once Gibson was okay. So that would be a blow to them because the Ducks got to figure this out. I mean, Stoner did play a couple of games down there. He got that one fight too. So he seemed okay, but they said he wasn't officially cleared yet. Was the last word we heard as far as playing with the Ducks. But I think he'd be good to go. So that's kind of what you're looking at. You're looking at basically the 6 defensemen. As you mentioned, if for some reason Vatanen or Stoner are not able to go, then they're going to have to pull up one of those guys. As you mentioned from the Gulls, maybe Schultz, Magna, Ginnon, Walensky. One of those guys probably be our likely bet if they do. They may even bring one of those up anyways, Eddie, because if the Ducks have Vatanen and Stoner, they're only going to have 6. They may want that 7th guy. I mean, it also depends on what's going on with Lindholm. We haven't heard an update on him yet either. So that's the only thing that really scares me right now with the Ducks. I mean, they're playing a lot better. They're starting to score on the power play. Everybody's starting to, score. Perry's getting back on there, the scoring. Silverberg's doing this thing. Eves has been blowing it up. That's really what it looks like right now for the Ducks. The Ducks also did recall Kassé again. They had him up earlier on the road trip when Getzlaf was questionable, so they brought him back up. So we'll have to wait and see if somebody else comes up. But with the way the Ducks are going now, Eddie, I think you have to like what's going on. Raymond asked the question about Silverberg and his contract and if he's paying off, and I'd have to say yes. I think that Kessler, Cogliano, Silverberg line has been doing well. The only question, as you mentioned earlier, was they didn't really shut down McDavid the last couple of games, and that's a little bit frustrating. I mean, obviously they played the line changing game in that Edmonton game since they had home ice, but that's probably we haven't talked about all the playoff matchups yet. But if the Ducks are going to play Edmonton, that's probably the only concern I see. But otherwise, yes, I love the way Silverberg's been playing as of late.
Yeah, and by no means is it an easy thing to do to shut down Connor McDavid.
Exactly.
I was surprised before the last two games that he'd only had 2 points in the first 6 games against the Ducks. I mean, a matter of time before he figured things out and was able to get a step ahead of Ryan Kessler. As good as Ryan Kessler is as a defensive forward, I mean, this is arguably one of the best players in the NHL right now. He has the most points in the NHL. He's got 95. Probably the only guy who could reach 100 this season. There's a reason why he's had 3 points in each of the last 2 games against the Ducks. But, the Ducks have still been able to grind out and get points in both of those games. So, I mean, it's gonna be impossible to shut him down for 7 straight games. But the Ducks are gonna have to grind out wins if they're gonna play him in the second round. And I think they can do that. I mean, you look at their last 12 games, they're on a 12-game point streak. They're 9-0-3. And I think the most important stat here is since February 14th, they're 12-1-1 against teams in a playoff position entering yesterday. So, I mean, that's great. That's something about the Ducks that we've criticized in past seasons, winning the easy games but not showing up against teams who are in playoff positions. And for them to be 12-1-1 against those teams for more than over a month, and over the last 14 games, 12 wins and points in 13, that's an important stat heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, exactly. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We said this is what the Ducks need to do, and they've done it. So now the only question is them trying to stay healthy. That's the big issue, obviously, and we're providing the updates as much as we have them. Another thing is the Ducks, for the 4th season in a row, achieved the 100-point feat. The only other team to do that in the last 4 seasons is our favorite, the Chicago Blackhawks. So that's where the Ducks are at in terms of point totals. But George had a question about it. He wonders, since the Ducks, even though they've been getting over 100 points, and you have the stats on this, Eddie, they've been getting a little bit less each year. Do you think that they're maybe sliding a little bit, or do you think the Pacific Division is getting tougher? What's your take on that? I kind of lean towards the Pacific is getting a little bit tougher because getting over 100 points each season, whether it's a few or more, as you'll discuss, is still a good feat.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, you go back to 13-14. I mean, that's their best season ever. They had 116 points. They had 54 wins. Nothing could top that. They were a great team that season as well. And then 109 the season after that. Then 103 last year, and they're sitting at 101 with 2 games to go. So they could still pass 103 and actually be better than last season. But yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, obviously you've got Getzlaf, Perry, Kessler getting a little bit older. You got a lot of young guys in the lineup this year, so it's understandable. And we've seen a little bit of a transition through the younger defense coming in with Theodore and Montour, Raquel emerging, Richie starting to show that he's ready to play. So, and then with Edmonton finally being good, with Calgary starting to be a very good team as well. You've got the Sharks, obviously, who are always good. So having 4 very competitive teams, and then the Kings too. I mean, they're still competitive every season, even though they missed the playoffs this year. They're still a tough team to play. They always play the Ducks hard. So to have that many teams that are competitive that you play so many times a year, it's definitely it's a factor in having less points. But I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, yes, it's going down, but it's going down from 116 points. I mean, that's, like I said, the Ducks' best season ever. That's over 70% point percentage. I mean, if you're sitting around 100 points, you're doing something right. And if it still could be more than last season. So I don't think it's anything to worry about.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think there's any issue as far as the points. Like you said, getting over 100, winning the division too, which, I mean, we talked about winning the division and we don't really care. And the players say they don't care. Obviously, you want to play well, and the Ducks are. So the way it looks right now is the Ducks are in first place with 101 points. Edmonton's behind them by 4 points, but they do have a game in hand. If the Ducks do win out, then either win and some kind of a point in the other game. If they get at least 3 points out of the next two games, they will make it because Edmonton can only get up to 103. So if the Ducks get to 104, they will be good to go. So it's still not solid yet on the playoff picture. It looks like the Ducks could end up in first. They're in a good spot. We got Edmonton and San Jose playing each other. Have to see how that game pans out. And then Calgary is definitely going to be either the first or second wild card. They and Nashville are both tied with 92 points. Calgary has 2 more regulation/overtime wins, that row category. So the way it looks like now, in at least the Western Conference, Eddie, you've got Chicago solid as first in their division. Minnesota second. St. Louis is also battling it out with Nashville. They're a point ahead of Nashville, but they have a game in hand too. So there could be a little bit of flip-flopping there. But it's pretty solidified. At least we know the teams that are in the Western Conference, just not the positioning. But for the Ducks, right now, if it was to begin, they would play Calgary. Edmonton would play San Jose in the Pacific. So no, I think that's a good route for the Ducks. I mean, like to see Edmonton and San Jose beat each other up, and hopefully the Ducks take out Calgary. I kind of like that, but obviously we're going to have to wait a couple of days and see what happens, Eddie.
Yeah. The most likely opponents are Calgary and Nashville, like you said. I don't know how much I'd like to see a rematch of last year, as frustrating as that playoff series was, but you look how intense the last 2 games against Calgary were. That's going to be a tough series too. But I think if you had to pick one, I think I'd rather play Calgary. I think the Ducks play Calgary well. I think their goaltending's a little bit suspect, still a little bit of a younger team, and I think the Ducks could take a 7-game series against the Flames. Nashville, I think, would be a little bit tougher. I think they're a better team than they've played this season. A lot of people had them winning the Western Conference this year. That's how good that they thought they were going to be, especially after that PK Subban trade. So there's always a chance that they could turn into that team. And they've been a great team at home, so it's a tough one. But you can't count out St. Louis either. I mean, they're only 1 point up on the Flames and Nashville. They do have a game in hand, but there's always a chance they could fall down there and the Ducks could play them. And then they still haven't clinched the Pacific, like you said. So there's still a chance they could fall down and possibly play the Oilers. Slim chance that they would play maybe the Sharks. It's tough. I mean, I think it, like you said, it's realistic that it could be Calgary and Nashville, but we'll have to wait and see. These last few games for these teams here are going to be important.
Yeah, and I don't want to get into that. I mean, I know we do mention Calgary, but as far as the Ducks beating them, but I don't want to say that, we're going to beat whoever, because then that's going to come back and haunt us if we lose, like what we did with Nashville. A lot of people wanted to play Nashville last year, and we saw what happened in a 7-game series. So, whoever, if the Ducks win the division or not, and whoever they play, I don't really care. I think the biggest thing on most Ducks fans' minds out there is the health of the Ducks defense, and I think that's what we got to worry about. As far as getting Lindholm, Vatanen, and Fowler back. Obviously, Holzer with his personal issues too, so we got all this, and Stoner too. So I mean, there's just all this going on with the defense. Is really the main concern for the Ducks. Let's take a look over in the Eastern Conference. Stuff hasn't been settled over there as much, Eddie. I mean, you have Washington, obviously, they're going to be first. They won the President's Trophy, which, some people say that's a curse, but they're in there. You got Pittsburgh, Columbus, and the Rangers. They all made it in the Metropolitan, which we all knew that wasn't really going to be an issue. But then you go to Atlantic, and it's all crazy over there. You got Montreal that's made it with 101 points, just like the Ducks. But then you've got Ottawa, Boston, and Toronto. All a point separates them. So still a lot to be decided in the Eastern Conference as opposed to the Western.
Yeah, there actually are some matchups decided in the East. The Rangers are going to be playing Montreal in the first round. There's no way either of them can move up or down in the standings. And the Penguins are going to be playing the Columbus Blue Jackets in the first round. It just depends on who's going to get home ice advantage in that series, which means the rest that has to be decided is between Ottawa, Boston, and Toronto. And the final playoff spot could be decided today, as Ottawa plays Boston today, and all they need is a point to clinch a playoff spot. And Toronto also just needs a win against Tampa Bay to clinch a playoff spot. And I think if you look at the standings, it's probably going to be those 8 teams that are currently in playoff spots that are going to finish there. It would take a lot of work for Tampa Bay or the Islanders to get into a playoff spot right now. And I mean, it's surprising to say for Tampa Bay, I mean, we all thought they were going to be right back in near the top of the Atlantic Division this season and be a powerhouse. But, they're sitting 5 points out of the playoffs with 6 games to go. They have no margin for error. They can't lose a game. They have to beat Toronto today to pick up points. But realistically, it's going to be tough for them. And I think Toronto's probably going to clinch a playoff spot within the next few games. And then we've got our 8 set in the Eastern Conference. And then it all comes down to who has to play Washington in the first round, whether it be Toronto, Boston, or Ottawa. And I think they're all trying to avoid that right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about teams you don't want to play in the playoffs, yeah, I don't want to play Washington.
Yeah.
And that's one team that you want to avoid. And ironically, that's what, if you caught it last week, Phil Hewitt had his weekly show, and I was on his show. We actually talked about a little bit of hockey. His show is more of a national show about news, and we talked about funny things around the world. But we did talk hockey a little bit. And yes, he had asked me who I thought in the East would be the top teams, and I mentioned Washington, Pittsburgh, and Columbus, and then he told me, well, pick one. I said, well, obviously Washington. So that is the team that I would not want to play. That is the team that I'm pretty sure that most people think is the favorite, out of the East. I mean, obviously Pittsburgh and Columbus are tough teams as well. That they've been up there before. So we'll see what happens in the East. The Atlantic is obviously the weaker division, but some stuff still needs to get decided. So, a lot of stuff going on. The final week of hockey, nothing's been resolved 100% yet, but, the Ducks are going to take on Chicago, and then they're going to face the Kings, who are out of the playoffs. They're probably getting ready to hit the green right now. They did help out the Ducks a little bit by beating Edmonton. I mean, if you care about, winning the division, they did help out in that regard. But otherwise, those are the last 2 games that the Ducks have, Eddie. And like I said, I like to see the Ducks, win out the last 2 games, not necessarily to win the division, but, just to stay on a win streak going into the playoffs. But, the biggest concern, obviously, is the Ducks' health right now on defense.
Yeah. It's going to be a tough game. We talked about this before the podcast, but since the Chicago's on the road, they probably don't sit guys like Patrick Kane or Jonathan Taves. They're most likely going to be playing in this game. So it's going to be tough. And, they're the best team in the Western Conference, one of the best teams in the NHL, been a thorn in the side of the Ducks in the playoffs over recent seasons. So it's going to be a big game. I think it's a good measuring stick for the Ducks. Like I said, mentioned before, they were 12-1-1 in their last 14 games against teams in playoff positions. This is arguably the toughest one out of those. This is a team that you could face in the conference finals. Of course, we don't want to see that, but if you can come out today, play a strong game, obviously it really doesn't mean a lot for both teams. But both teams are still be fighting hard, and they're going to want to win. Especially the Ducks, they're going to want to try and get as many points as they can to try and clinch this Pacific Division, so that they can have home ice throughout the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. So it's a big game today, and then obviously the Kings in the last game of the season. They always play us hard. They're going to want to. It won't really be playing spoiler, but they're going to want to try and grab some points off us where they can. It's going to be a tough physical game. Again, lucky for us, these last 2 games are at Honda Center. The Ducks have been one of the best teams in the NHL at home this season. So to finish on a high note, like you said, I think will be important, especially for their confidence and for John Gibson's confidence heading into the playoffs.
One scenario too, Eddie, that may happen against the Kings, if the Ducks do beat Chicago, obviously they've had a tough time with them this season, but if they do beat Chicago and Edmonton isn't able to get 2 points in their game, the Ducks could rest some players against the Kings if they have home ice wrapped up. I don't know if Randy Carlyle will do it. We did see Boudreau do it, in seasons past. So that's another possibility. Obviously, getting a little ahead of ourselves. They got to take on Chicago, which is no small task. But that's something to look for. That maybe the Ducks will do that. Like you said, the Kings do play physical, play tough against the Ducks, and we don't want to risk any more injuries. So that's something to kind of look. That may be on the radar as the season winds down on Sunday.
Yeah, and just for everybody to know as well, there is actually a clinching scenario for the Ducks to clinch Pacific Division tonight. San Jose plays Edmonton, so if San Jose beats Edmonton tonight, That would give San Jose 99 points with 1 game to go. They won't be able to catch the Ducks if the Ducks get a point tonight against Chicago, and that would leave Edmonton at 97 with only 2 games to go, and they would only be able to get 101 points out of that. So if the Ducks get at least a point tonight and Edmonton loses, then they do clinch the Pacific Division tonight, and that would, like you said, give them a chance possibly to rest players against Los Angeles. You're at home. You can call guys up from San Diego if you have to. You can rest guys to prevent injury, and that might be something they might be more keen to do now after seeing Fowler go down with only 2 games remaining before the playoffs. So yeah, I think it's something to keep our eye on tonight. I'm gonna be scoreboard watching all night on that Edmonton San Jose game to see if the Ducks have a chance.
Yeah, and one last final fan question too. The Ducks are going to play Chicago tonight, and Gary asked, if the Ducks do get to the conference final, and it is against Chicago, which a lot of people are saying, hey, maybe the Ducks in Chicago again. What do we think? To me, I think the Ducks can beat Chicago in a 7-game series. I think it's going to be difficult. We've seen it before when the Ducks almost had them. They should have had them in 5 games. If you remember that mega, double, triple, whatever overtime game that they had in, I believe it was game 2 of that series that went forever, and the Ducks hit like 500 posts. But they could have won that series. Really, for me, though, if the Ducks are going to even get to the Western Conference Final, get past the first 2 rounds, I know it's beating a dead horse, but it's just really the health of the Ducks right now. It's really the defense. Vatanen and Theodore are going to have to step up, and that's really going to be the key, I think, right now for the Ducks. You've got Gibson's back. He's playing well. Bernier's been playing outstanding. The Ducks are scoring. We forgot to mention Patrick Eaves. He's got 10 goals in 18 games with the Ducks. He's got over 30 now this season. So everything else looks right, and I think the Ducks could do it, but they just got to make sure everybody, if they don't have Fowler, I don't know. It's going to be interesting, but I think they can definitely, compete with them for sure if both teams do meet in the Western Conference Final.
Yeah, and hopefully by the time they get there too, Fowler might be back. I think this is a different Chicago team than we've seen before. I think they're obviously still a good team. They've been very good all season. You've got guys like Kane, Taves, Panarin, who are the key pieces of this team. Obviously, Duncan Keith as well. But I think there's a couple key reasons why they're a little bit different this year. I think they're a lot younger. They've got guys like Hartman, Hayden, Hinestrona. They've got Schmaltz playing, like a lot of rookies playing. They have been playing very well, but come playoff time, that could change. And I think the goaltending for them hasn't been as key as you would expect for them. Corey Crawford's been decent this season. Scott Darling's been pretty good for them at times, but they're both kind of iffy this season. And the special teams for the Blackhawks are in the bottom half of the NHL. They're 18th on the power play, 24th on the penalty kill. So they're not great all around this season. They have 108 points somehow still. With all those things mentioned, they still have 108 points. So they're still the best team in the Western Conference. But I think it's a little bit different makeup than we've seen in the past, and I think there's a chance that if the Ducks get to them in the Western Conference Final this year, the Blackhawks have arguably a tougher route, and I think it could be the year that the Ducks move on and beat them in the Western Conference Final. But it's going to take a lot of effort. It's very difficult going into United Center and getting wins, and the Blackhawks will have home ice advantage in any series that could happen in the conference finals between the two.
Yeah, so that'll be that whole matchup game as we've talked about. We've seen, especially like with the Ducks in Edmonton, we've talked about, and some of the other opponents. So keep that under wraps, though. That's a little bit far away, but the question was asked, so we'd like to answer it, obviously, and try to get to as many of your fan questions as we can. The only other big news left, Eddie, is the Olympics and the NHL, or the lack of the Olympics and the NHL. So Gary Bettman's putting his foot down. He's saying just say no to the Olympics. And some players upset. You've seen Ovechkin come out and talk about it. Teemu was upset about it. A lot of people upset about it. What's your take on this, Eddie? Why did the league do it, and do you agree or disagree?
I'm going to come out and say right away, I don't think it's a good decision before I give my opinion, because it's a little bit of probably an unpopular opinion, but I don't agree with them banning players in the NHL and saying, we can't go, but I get where they're coming from. I understand that they want to prevent injury. The NHL is a business. The players are part of that business for them. They make them their money. They don't want them to go and get injured, and they don't want to interrupt the NHL schedule at an important part where teams are racing to get into the playoffs. It's arguably one of the most exciting times in the NHL season, and they're going to lose their superstars for 2 weeks and you have to cut the schedule for 2 weeks where they go and play in the Olympics. So I get it. I get it from a business standpoint. It makes sense. It's obviously disappointing for the players, but you have to think the players have not always gone to the Olympics. They've gone to the Olympics for, I think, it was the past 20 years. Before that, it was amateur players. And maybe it's a chance to give it back to the amateur players, let them play. You're playing in the NHL. I think if you're a player in the NHL, you should respect their decision, no matter how much you don't like it, no matter how much you want to go to the Olympics. You're playing in the NHL. That should be your number one priority. And if they say don't go to the Olympics, don't go to the Olympics. It's disappointing, but you have the World Cup of Hockey. You have the World Championships. Obviously not at the same caliber and same prestige as the Olympics, but it's just my opinion. I think if you're a player in the NHL and they say don't go, don't go. Even if your owner says you can go, I just say stay, play the season, don't go. I mean, your team should come first.
I kind of go along with you too on this. I mean, I get it. Like Teemu's saying, he's been in 6, Olympics. He should be able to go. Of course, Ovechkin's been outspoken about it too. Some of the other star players have been talking about it. I get it. If they want to go and do their thing, that's what they want to do, then do it. But like you said, on the other flip side is you got these other younger players that want to go play and do their thing. You don't want to always take up all their spots too. The other issue is the schedule with the NHL, players getting injured. We saw that in the World Cup of Hockey. If you remember, some players didn't go, even though they maybe weren't really injured, but maybe they just didn't want to get injured. I'm not going to call out anybody, but we know that there were some people that didn't go because of that. I mean, I would let the players decide if they wanted to, but I kind of lean on the side of what you're saying is that it's probably better to, go with your team, do what you got to do. Like you said, if they do the World Cup of Hockey maybe more often, they can look forward to that. And I mean, yeah, it's the Olympics, but I still think the NHL takes priority. Though my thing is if a certain star player wants to go, then it's really between him and the owner and the management of that team to try and figure it out. But it's definitely interesting. A lot of people are really upset about this. It's a big topic. So, the NHL is saying no to the Olympics. So that's kind of the latest on that. And like I said, maybe if they could have the World Cup of Hockey a little bit more, that might make it a little bit better, Eddie, because they'll have that before the season. They can kind of do their thing there, and it doesn't really interrupt the NHL schedule.
Yeah, and even having the World Cup of Hockey every 4 years, like the Olympics, or even every 2 years to have it a little bit sooner, I think that's fine. I get it. I understand it. The players want to represent their country, especially players like Ovechkin, his family, with their history with the Olympics. I understand, and obviously wanting to win a medal for Russia. It's understandable. I get where they're coming from, but when you're looking at it as an NHL fan and you're saying, they're going to be gone for 2 weeks of the season, we all watch Olympic hockey, but for me, even if the NHL players don't go, I'll still watch it. And I'll still be able to watch NHL at the same time. I just think if you're signed a contract with a team, you play for that team. In the example of Ovechkin, he plays for the Capitals. His country is obviously with Russia, and any chance he has the opportunity to go play for them, he should be able to, unless it interferes with the team you've signed a contract for. So, I mean, the NHL, the team that you play in the league for the NHL, and it doesn't make sense for me for them to go and forfeit playing for their team to go play for their country at the Olympics. And like I said, I understand where they're coming from. It's just, the team should be your first priority. And I think when you have chances when they give you chances like the World Cup of Hockey and the World Championships to play for, and those don't interfere with your team, then go. You don't see players going and forfeiting the playoffs to go play in the World Championships. And obviously it's a less high caliber event than the Olympics, but you still don't see it. And there's a reason the World Cup of Hockey is before the NHL season, so that it doesn't interfere with the schedule. So I mean that's just where I'm coming from. Obviously, it's the unpopular opinion right now. A lot of people think they should go, but I mean, if the league's saying you shouldn't, I think you should agree with what the league's saying.
Yeah, like you said, it's a contract, and if you're going to abandon your team, for 5 or 6 games, I mean, well, I mean, that's kind of on you. I mean, it's a tough spot, no doubt. You know what I mean? I see both sides of the argument, and it's something that we'll probably talk about in a couple of future podcasts. So if you have more questions or comments about that, we'll definitely talk about it more as that develops. But as the playoffs come up, we're looking forward to the Ducks, see how they do, where they're going to finish up. We did have a watch party when the Ducks played the Jets. We are going to try and have one each round. Hopefully the Ducks go multiple rounds, but keep your eye out for that. We'll be posting some stuff about that. And we'll just go from there. Also, I mentioned that, I was on Phil Hewitt's show. If you haven't seen it or heard it, it's philhewittandfriends.com. So check that out. He does a weekly show. Like I said, it's on more world topics and things like that. Not so much on hockey, but I was on there last week and we kind of went over some funny things and had some fun. So check that out if you get a chance. And with that, we'll be back, probably with a playoff preview, Eddie, as the Ducks wind up the season with these final 2 games. So let's go Ducks, and we'll see you in a week.